All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful day of virtual touring. Today we have a guest on Adventures with Sarah. Live from Rome is a local guide named Agnes Crawford. Buongiorno, Agnes.
Buongiorno, buonasera. Buonasera.
Buonasera, sì, yeah. Well, brand new morning here in Seattle, but evening, you're 5 o'clock, right, for you?
That's right, and I'm afraid it's a rather overcast, slightly blustery day, but fingers crossed the rain holds off.
So Agnes is a local guide in Rome, and she has a website called Understanding Rome, and she has been one of the pioneers out there. I've been watching. I'm kind of searching for all the people that are doing these virtual tours because I really want to get a lot of my colleagues on board with this. So she's been doing a lot of interesting things. Coming up this next week, she has a talk on Tivoli. I know some of you asked me to go out to Tivoli, but I didn't have time. So if you'd like to see a talk on Tivoli, she's going to be doing that. And twice a week, she offers virtual tours of different sites related to Rome or the environs of Rome. So you should really check them out there. At 15 euros, is that what they are, Agnes, for your talks?
So 15 euros for the talks online. The virtual tours yet to kick off with, but the online talks, 50 minutes, as many questions as you like, 15 euros. Lots and lots of photos taken by me in the last couple of days.
So this is a really fun way to get out there and travel if you guys are thirsting for a fabulous local guide who wants to tell you all about destinations. So that's something, Understanding Rome's her website. So here's what we're going to do today. Agnes is going to just go ahead and I'm just going to cut her loose and she's going to show you around the Roman Forum. I am going to be tracking on Facebook your questions. So if you have questions, just go ahead and type them into the chat box and I will ask Agnes for you. If I see them, hopefully I'll see them. And we'll just get to learn a little bit from somebody different. I know you guys are used to hearing my voice, but I thought it would be really great to hear somebody else's voice because it's always wonderful to learn from lots of different people. So take it away, Agnes.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. And I'm standing here in front of the fence. In fact, I'm standing here by what is basically my favorite ever parking spot. So I just parked my my Vespa right here. And why is it my favorite parking spot? Because immediately behind me, you can see the Temple of Saturn, which is quite a cool thing to find in front of one's parking spot. Just through the fence here is the Roman Forum. If we turn this around and peek through the fence, you get a view into the forum itself. In fact, what I'm really going to be talking about particularly is the Palatine Hill, which is the hill up here to the left. But the great thing about the Palatine Hill is it gives us some splendid views over the Roman Forum from up there as well. And right in front of us, as you can see, the columns of the Temple of Saturn. Saturn, of course, is one of the super duper ancient Roman gods, one of the gods older than the hills, so to speak. He's got a planet and a day of the week named after him, so he must be pretty important. And just to the left, if you can see, there are 3 columns there standing on their own, and that's a temple to the divine Vespasian. He was an emperor who became a god. So here, you know, in this first glimpse into the forum, you've got this idea of the old gods and the new. The Romans had lots and lots of gods. They kept making new ones, and we've got just 2 examples of that right there. And immediately to the right, you can also see the building of the Senate House in the distance. So there's a glimpse into the Roman Forum, which for 1100 years was the absolute hub of the city of Rome. It was the busiest place in the world 2000 years ago. And as we see today, it's a rather quiet pile of rubble under grey skies. Long before the Roman Forum was ever thought of, and long before the drainage of that low-lying valley, which would see the creation of what would become the hub of the economic, political, legal center of the city, there were significant geological events which precede Rome's inhabitation, but which lead to the creation of the 7 hills upon which the city was created. And the hill we're heading up here, the Capitoline Hill, the clue is in the name, the Capitol. Of course, it's from an original idea by the Romans, but of course, you have one of those in the US as well. And the Capitol Hill takes its name from caput, the head. And it was absolutely the heart of the city. And immediately behind me here, you can see a bit of the rock that the seven hills of Rome are made of. It's this rather rough, reddish, patchy coloured sort of rock, which is compacted volcanic ash. And the compacted volcanic ash is, the result of volcanic events. Umpteen, I think the last major eruption was some 500,000 years ago, give or take. So significantly preceding any human inhabitation. And the rather rough rock that you can see here is a reminder of how the city would have looked long before its inhabitation. The foundation of the city, legend said, was the work of Romulus, the first king of Rome. And the city is founded on the 21st of April of the year 753 BC, according to legend. And it's founded on the next hill over, which we're going to catch a glimpse of in a minute, which is the Palatine Hill.
So you notice behind you, there's a wedding couple.
Yes, so right up on the hill, you can see right up on the hill is the town hall, as we'll see. So a building which was, now taking their photos heading up the hill, a building which was created for housing the archives of the ancient city in the 1st century BC, after various vicissitudes, is now the town hall of the city of Rome. And on a Friday afternoon in October, somebody is clearly on their way up to get married. So they're just taking their photographs on their way up into the sort of civil service area of the town hall. Yes, when one wanders across the Capitoline Hill, chances are you're going to bump into a wedding. Let's turn the camera around and you can see the view right in front of me here, which even under slightly grey skies is undoubtedly one of the finest views I know of. And so here we're looking out, we've got those 8 columns right in front of us of the Temple of Saturn. Like so many buildings in the Roman Forum, it's a rebuilding of a rebuilding of a rebuilding of a temple, which, as far as the Romans were concerned, had stood there since the dawn of time. So the Romans are constantly rebuilding things, but always on the same spot. They're very keen of the genius loci, the spirit of the place. Just to the left of the temple is an arch, and the arch is that of Septimus Severus. That's a triumphal arch. So you win a victory, you build an arch. They squeeze that in where they can find some space amongst the existing structures. And if we scoot round a little bit further over, right at the end, you might just be able to glimpse the top of the Colosseum peeking out on the other side of the Roman Forum. So yeah, we look over the Forum today, but imagine it: temples, courthouses, political meeting places, shops, snack stands, people hanging around. Once, as we were saying, the busiest place in the world, at the center of an empire which at its pinnacle stretched from Scotland to Sudan, from the Atlantic to Iraq. And what better place to have one's wedding photographs taken? Immediately behind the photos, there they are, they're waving, immediately behind the happy couple, you can see 3 grey arches. And this is the lower part of a building that dates to the 1st century BCE, the Tabularium. So as we mentioned, the archive building of the ancient city, which is subsequently incorporated into the medieval fortress, which you can see up on top, which in turn would become a Renaissance palace, and which now houses the town hall of the city of Rome. In fact, on the right-hand side of the building, just to the left of that umbrella pine, there's a projecting balcony. That's the balcony at the office of the mayor of the city of Rome, who has all of this to look out upon, a sobering reminder of what happens when things don't go according to plan, of course. If we consider that 2,000 years ago, the Romans milling around the Roman Forum must have felt themselves invincible. To look at this pile of rubble is, of course, a sobering reminder of the way things panned out. And of course, we have this rather splendid juxtaposition here, because we mentioned the Temple of Saturn, but look behind that and you can see a church. That's the church of Saints Martina and Luca. And that's a church dating to the 1600s. And a reminder that Rome, a city of temples, would become a city of churches. The city of the emperors would, of course, crumble, and from the ashes would rise the city of the popes. So the ruling figure in the city would shift, and the city would become a Christian city. And of course, today there are some 957 churches to be found within the area of the city of Rome. So when you look at a view like that, it's a rather good juxtaposition of the two elements sort of cheek by jowl. I mentioned the Palatine Hill. See those trees up there on the horizon? Those are the trees on top of the Palatine Hill. The Palatine Hill is where legendarily Romulus founded Rome. So Romulus is, tradition says, the first king of Rome. He founds the city, as we mentioned, on the 21st of April of the year 753 BC, which is, I mean, a ridiculously specific date for a legend, of course. I mean, you can add in about 4:30 in the afternoon, I think that. But it was a legend that the Romans were very keen on. The Romans were fixated on their own origins. They were fixated on their origin story. The idea of Romulus, the son of Mars, as the founder of the city, was absolutely central to that. And therefore, the imperial palace up on the Palatine Hill was the logical place in which the emperors should live. And this all sort of absolutely sort of centers around the figure of the first of the emperors, Augustus, who would call himself the new Romulus and would claim to be descended from Romulus himself and thus from Mars. So this was an exploitation of the Roman religion, of Roman legend, in the interests of the ruling emperor, you know, propaganda to justify his right to rule. And from Augustus, who's very easy to remember, first Roman emperor ruling around the time of the believed date of the birth of Christ, the Roman Empire would survive for nearly 5 centuries. And the imperial palaces up on that hill, now it's all covered in trees and rural, but this was once the seat of the very complex that gives us the word palace. The hill takes its name, rather the complex took its name from the hill, not the other way around. The hill may, there are various theories, it may have been named in honor of Pallas Athena. So the word palace comes to us from the fact that the emperors of Rome lived on the Palatine Hill. And the rubble and ruin behind us, or behind me, I should say, is a reminder, of course, that despite the seeming invincibility of the empire, ultimately it would crumble. And as we mentioned, it would ultimately become supplanted by the city of the popes. So domes would replace temples. The title of the new ruler of Rome would become the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the ancient city had been Pontifex Maximus. Augustus had been Pontifex Maximus. The title would be adopted and used by the Christian rulers of Rome. And still today, Pope Francis has the title Pontifex Maximus. So the city religion would change, but the name of the guy in charge would remain the same. The Romanness of elements of the Roman Catholic Church is absolutely sort of worth considering. A city of temples becomes a city of churches, a multiplicity of gods becomes a multiplicity of saints. And after the fall of the Roman Empire, soon before the year 500, the city's focus would shift dramatically. I mean, bear in mind, 2,000 years ago, there were 1 million people living in Rome. It was the biggest city the world had ever seen. Jump forward 500 years after the fall of the Roman Empire, and in the year 1000, there were perhaps 20,000 people living in the city. So that's 2%. You know, the population was absolutely reduced to the core. The city was no longer the capital of empire. The empire had crumbled. It was the empire that was powering the city of Rome. Without its empire, it had no reason to be. And plague, pestilence, famine, and war can be thrown in there as well. And the city's population, over the course of many centuries, it wasn't built in a day, it didn't fall in a day, reduces dramatically after the fall of empire and after the subsequent rise from the ashes of the empire of the phoenix of the church. The city centre would shift. The Forum, which had been the absolute hub of the entire empire, the place where the belly button, the umbilicus of the city and thus of the empire was to be found, would be abandoned. It would become a quarry for spare parts. People were removing columns and taking them off to build churches, and the city's focus shifts. And in fact, the Capitoline Hills focus shifts as well. Whereas in ancient times, it looked over the Forum. In the Renaissance, it would be remodeled by Michelangelo to look towards the Vatican. And the ancient tabularium would be sort of facaded, and given the facade, the building immediately behind me here is the Palace of the Senators, which would become the city government offices effectively under papal control from the Middle Ages onwards, re-facaded by Michelangelo in the 16th century. He sticks a new front on an existing building, the Palace of the Senators. The building behind me is the Palace of the Conservators, which he also sticks a new facade on. And directly in front, he builds from scratch this building, which he calls imaginatively enough, the Palazzo Nuovo, the new building. Why does he build it from scratch? Well, he builds it to create a nice, symmetrical, ordered space to give the impression that this had all been planned carefully, not that it was a gradual accretion of higgledy-piggledy buildings, which are trying to be hammered together to create some kind of logically ordered town planning. And in the center of his new facade of the Palace of the Senators, he places a statue of the goddess Roma. Well, Michelangelo is doing this for a pope. The design was for Pope Paul III. Why would a pope find himself with a statue of the goddess Roma? On the right-hand side, see this fellow here. Whenever you see a big bearded man leaning on one hip, he's always a river god. And if you look under his elbow, you can see which river is his. The she-wolf, with the twin boys, Romulus and Remus. So the river we're looking at here is the Tiber. On the other side, the second river of the Roman Empire is represented, because the source of grain to feed 1 million people in the city of Rome 2,000 years ago were the fertile plains of the Valley of the Nile. So Michelangelo finds bits of these ancient statues, glues them back together, and has them placed here for a pope. And of course, one might ask oneself, why on earth is Pope Paul III, collecting these ancient sculptures? But absolutely, the objective is a reminder of the glories of the ancient city, a reminder of the church's power as the successor and ultimately the triumphant force that had been victorious over the Roman Empire. And in fact, in the center of the square, let's just head over and have a look, is a statue. Today we see a copy. The original is now in the museum, the Capitoline Museum, which is absolutely excellent. And indeed the first public museum ever opened, long before Michelangelo remodeled the piazza. Well, that's 60 years before his design. A room of ancient sculpture was opened to the public in Rome in 1471. So the Palatine Museum is the oldest in the world. I'll just turn the camera around the other way, so that you can see a different wedding party. As we mentioned, this is the town hall So I think it's 1 in, 1 out every 15 minutes, something like that. And I expect they've got quite a backlog with the months that everybody spent stuck in their houses. In the center of the square, erected on the plinth by Michelangelo for his patron, Pope Paul III, whose crest you can just see down here, the crown and the keys, the shield, the symbol of the lilies, the gigli of the Farnese family. So the papal crest is underneath the statue of a pagan emperor. This is Marcus Aurelius. He's the one who dies at the beginning of the movie Gladiator, pagan emperor. You know, what on earth is a pope doing with the statue of a pagan emperor? Well, he's making the illusion that Rome's grandeur during its imperial past is being restored. The Renaissance, of course, is what we're talking about here. The rebirth of ancient art and ancient culture, and the idea that the study of the ancient world was not contradictory, but rather was complementary to the study of the Christian world, which is absolutely one of the sort of tenets that underpins the Renaissance. So paganism and Judaism as the roots from which Christianity had flowered was absolutely the thinking in the 16th century. And Pope Paul III, on the one hand, is beginning the meetings of the Council of Trent to address the issues raised by Martin Luther during the Protestant Reformation. In private, he's carrying on regardless, and he's erecting statues of pagan emperors in the center of the city of Rome. If we turn the camera this way again, and there we go, there's some wedding activity taking place. There are like 3 different weddings happening at once, as far as I can tell. At the top of the steps, just in front of me with their backs to us, you can see 2 statues. These 2 are reassembled by Michelangelo. They're statues that were discovered not far from here in the area of what would become the Jewish ghetto. And they are statues of twin horsemen, Castor and Pollux. And you see they have these sort of eggshell hats. Castor and Pollux were born from eggs after their father, Zeus, had his wicked way with their mother Leda when he sort of turned himself into a swan, because that's the sort of thing that happens in Greek mythology. And these 2 sculptures of Castor and Pollux are amongst the other pagan decorations assembled here by Michelangelo's design for Pope Paul III. There's a rather splendid view as well if we look up just slightly to the right here, because you've got Castor and Pollux. Well, the one on the right is either Castor or Pollux. In fact, as far as I know, they've never been specifically identified. They're identical. But you can see one of the Dioscuri, one of these horsemen. To the right of that, the brick facade is the facade of the Church of St. Mary at the Altar of Heaven, which is a medieval church built upon the place where legend says Augustus was presented with a vision of the Virgin and Child, which foretold the birth of Christ. That is, of course, a medieval legend. To the right, we've got a glimpse of the Renaissance building designed by Michelangelo. And over it all, the winged Victory leading a chariot, we can just see her from behind, is the monument to the unification of the Italian state, which takes place in the late 19th century. So just in this one view, you've got ancient, medieval, Renaissance, 19th century. You've got the layers of Roman history absolutely sort of piled one on top of the other. And of course, you know, one of the things that makes Rome so incredibly interesting is the multiple phases of the city's history, which we see absolutely everywhere. The city of churches is built upon and among the city of temples. Very often the materials which are used in the building of the Christian city are appropriations of the columns looted from, for example, the Roman Forum. And this idea that the city of emperors had to a certain extent been abandoned, and that the city of popes would turn its back on the Roman Forum and turn to face a new focus. And that new focus would be the Church of St. Peter, built upon the place of the believed tomb of the Apostle in the area of the Vatican Field, as it had been known in Roman times, on the other side of the river. And if we just make our way up here, we can catch a glimpse over the city that would supplant the city of temples. And all of those domes we mentioned will hove into view in just a moment. I mean, it's worth considering that even in the 16th century, even when Michelangelo is rebuilding the Capitoline Hill in that grand manner, the city is perhaps a city of 100,000. The Renaissance had restored Rome's fortunes, but it was certainly nowhere on the same scale as it once had been. And if we switch the view, you can see right in front of me here, the Theatre of Marcellus, another reminder of the layers of Rome's history. A first century BC theatre turned into medieval fortress with a Renaissance palace built on top. The dome next to it is the only square-based dome in Rome, and this is the dome of the modern synagogue, built in 1904. But if we look over this way, as you can see, the sun is trying to break through. You've got a view out across the multiple domes that make up the Renaissance and the Baroque city. And as we were saying, the Forum had been entirely left behind. That would remain referred to as the cow field, the Campo Vaccino, until excavations are taken place in a serious manner in the late 1800s. Before that, it was just looting. So effectively, cows and sheep were grazing in the area of the Roman Forum 150 years ago. And looking out this way, it was here that one found the new center of the city, which, as we mentioned, had become, of course, the city of the popes. And there we are. Rome in a nutshell. If anyone's got any questions, please jump in and give me a shout.
So I'm curious, Agnes, when you have people come and visit you, because you're a local guide,
Yep.
what do you think is sort of the ideal approach for understanding Rome? I mean, to get to know it. Let's say people have 2 or 3 days. People typically will focus on the ancient stuff. They'll focus on the Christian. But what is maybe an approach that'll get people a little bit closer to understanding? Because it's so difficult. It's such a multi-layered city.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great deal of it going on. I mean, obviously, when visiting anywhere, you should, start off by looking at the things that interest you most. And for everybody, that's going to be different. Some people are going to be more interested in the city's ancient history. Some people have no interest in going and looking at the place where lions and tigers and bears once ravaged people in the Colosseum. And I can certainly, to a certain point, see their point. It's a pretty brutal building. So I think, yeah, absolutely focus on what interests you particularly. But I would also suggest that it's a good idea not to try and separate the various phases of the city's history too neatly. Sometimes, there's this sort of desire that we have to make things sort of understandable by separating them nicely and neatly and saying, I'm going to go and look at things from the Roman Empire. Well, the thing is, lots of things from the imperial period. For example, on the other side of the Capitoline Hill, where I am now, is a church, St. Joseph of the Carpenters. The Church of St. Joseph of the Carpenters is built upon the Mamertine prison, which was the sort of hole in the ground, a former stone quarry of that rough tufa rock, which is where in the Acts of the Apostles, we're told that Peter and Paul were imprisoned. I mean, so there's a very fine example where you're talking about an important spot from the city's imperial history, which is a fundamental spot for its Christian history as well. Similarly, if you visit St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, if you go underground and you can organize this through the Vatican itself, you can visit the necropolis down there and you will see pagan tombs. But the presence of the church on top of it is because it was already a burial area, it was there that St. Peter was buried when he was martyred. And the position of his tomb is then why the church is built on top of it. So you can't really sort of separate out the various strands of the city's history in the nice, neat way that perhaps one might like. People talk often about Rome as being a kind of lasagna of centuries. I think rather than lasagna, it's soup. It's all everywhere. You know, with soup, you cannot extract all of the various, you know, you cannot go back to the original ingredients. There is a certain amount of surrendering oneself to the wonderful and beautiful and exciting chaos of the whole thing. On a practical note, my other advice would be don't do too much. Yeah. Don't try and do too much. Don't plan to do the Colosseum in the morning and the Vatican in the afternoon, because apart from the fact you'll be exhausted, but then when it comes to the end of the day, it's all rather jumbled up about what you've seen and what you've not. And you need to allow a bit of time, I think, just for wandering around and stopping and having a cup of coffee or a drink or something, and you know, watching the world go by as well. It's been here for as long as it's been here. You know, there's no need to do it all in one go. And I think sometimes, and it's impossible to see everything in Rome, absolutely impossible. Romans say, Roma non basta una vita. A lifetime isn't enough. And that's what people who are born and bred in Rome say. There is no way that one is ever going to do all of it. I don't think I've been to every single one of the 957 churches, close, but not every single one.
Mountain has been to all of the churches, but certainly not either of us.
No, I think Mountain probably has, absolutely. I've been to quite a lot of them, but not as dedicated as he is. Yeah, I would suggest plan one big thing for each day. Don't try and do too much, and this goes for any trip. This is how I plan things when I go on holiday. Like, don't beat yourself up about it if you can't fit everything in that you thought you might do, because you know it's supposed to be fun, and if it's hard work, then it's very difficult to absorb anything, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like that you talk about it as soup, because I think as a young tour guide 20 years ago when I started working, I always thought of it as an onion, because that's how my professor of architecture in Rome used to talk about it. Rome is an onion. But as I get older and the more I see, I realize I have been using minestrone. That's the word I use. It's minestrone. It's not really an onion or lasagna, it's minestrone. I have a question from one of our viewers. They wanted to know how long you've been based in Rome and what got you to Rome.
So I've lived in Rome for 20 years. I moved here in January of 2000, just the thing to do at the beginning of a new millennium, up sticks. I thought I'd be here for 6 months. I just graduated from university. I'm from London originally, but I went to university in Edinburgh and I studied a MA in architectural history and finished that, came to Rome for 6 months. I was 22 and seeking adventure and wondering what to do next. And one thing led to another, and I'm still here. And I started doing tours in 2001, quite quickly decided that it was something that I was very keen on doing. So I went through the relentless rigmarole of being properly licensed. In Italy, it's a nationally licensed profession. So did all my exams, and then I set up my own little business, because I thought I'd rather do tours that were the sort of tours that I would like to do, where you can take things at the speed that you want to take them at, and see as much or as little as people like. And this idea that sightseeing is not supposed to be a death march of fun. It is supposed to be entertaining and agreeable and enjoyable, and involve sitting down in shady spots and finding where all the drinking fountains are and getting an ice cream and all the rest of it. So yeah, basically that's what I do. That's what I do when people come to Rome. That's what I do at the moment. Not quite.
So that is to say, for those of you watching, if you go to Rome, she's a great local guide, and you can hire her for the day to take you to see whatever you wish. But here's my big question for you. I was in Rome for a couple of weeks recently, and I'm always looking for offbeat things that I haven't seen. I've spent 25 years coming and going from Rome, and I am always finding new things. So I'm wondering, what is your really off the beaten path, kind of strange thing that you really enjoy? What is something you love showing visitors that they would never have thought about?
Okay, there's a very small museum which has, it's got a couple of very interesting things in it, but it's got one amazing thing in it. It's called the Museum of the Early Middle Ages. It's in the EUR district, the EUR district, which is kind of a business district, basically, that was first laid out in the fascist period. And in that museum, which is, I mean, there's never anybody else there. It's there's a room reassembled from a building which was found at the port of Ostia Antica. And it has marble flooring, marble wall decoration. The whole thing is reassembled. It's absolutely spectacular. It's the sort of thing that would be in the first major room of any museum anywhere in the world. And it's in this small little museum on the edge of the city that most people don't know about. As far as things slightly less out of the way, in the area of Trastevere, one of my favorite things to do is to take people to the Church of Santa Cecilia in Trastevere. And if you're there at the right time and you ring the bell and you ask the nun nicely and give her a couple of euros a head, you can get in a wonky elevator and go up to have a look at some frescoes which were discovered in the 1990s and which date to about 1297. So that's a wonderful sort of surprise because it's so unlikely. And I feel every time I show that to somebody, I feel exactly the same excitement that I felt the first time I saw it myself. So those are two things that spring to mind. Rome has an absolute panoply of things like that. There's a department store with a bit of an ancient aqueduct underneath it, which if you're happening to wander by, you can pop in, go down and have a look. And it's just there. And it's the aqueduct that's been running for 2,000 years that still today supplies water to the Trevi Fountain. And it's hiding in the bottom of a sort of slightly shishi department store. And there are a number of great terraces and views that I like passing by as well. And I couldn't tell you any more examples because there are too many. But there are lots and lots and lots of fabulous, small, surprising things that if you don't know they're behind the door, you'd walk on by.
And I have to tell you that that's why, for me, everybody keeps asking me if I could live anywhere, where would I live? Rome is at the top of my list. Someday I'm going to be moving there for sure, because of the fact that you can never be bored. It's somewhat like London in that way, where there's always something new to discover. And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? And as a guide, that helps too with our work because we never get bored.
Absolutely. I never get bored. I've never seen everything. I don't pretend to have ever seen everything. I've been wandering around for 20 years, showing people around Rome. And I take new routes and I discover new things every time I do it. I was walking through the Forum yesterday, taking some photos for a privately requested online talk I'm doing tomorrow about the Roman Forum. And I wanted to take some fresh photos, and they'd done a whole load of pruning. They'd chopped down a couple of great big laurel bushes, which meant that there was a view that I've never seen before yesterday, because that happened in the last couple of weeks. So, you know, lurking behind bushes and trees, even in places that you think you know, there's always something new.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Agnes, for sharing your expertise with us today. And I just wanted for you to quickly tell us what talks you've got coming up soon on your website, Understanding Rome.
So this week I do a new subject every week, and I have a couple of different times to fit with various time zones. Those that work for those of you in the US are on a Wednesday and a Saturday at 7 o'clock Rome time, which is 1 o'clock East Coast. I think that's 10 o'clock in some bits of the West Coast. Yeah, I'm doing this week's talk is about the Villa d'Este in Tivoli, as Sarah mentioned. And I've got lots of fabulous photos I took 2 days ago there. You know, we'll be talking about the history of the fountains, the villa, the cardinal who built it, why he chose to build it like he did, the use of mythology, and that sort of thing. Next week's talk is about Caravaggio in Rome, the great painter from the very late early 1600s, and who is the absolute sort of cutting edge of modern art round about 1600s with his paintings of religious scenes depicting people he saw in the street with their dirty feet and their knobbly knees. And so we'll be talking a bit about Caravaggio, and he of course lived fast and died young, so there's a good story there as well. The following week I'm talking about the Renaissance and the Baroque history of the Field of Mars, which is the area that we mentioned behind me. It's where you find the Pantheon, the Trevi Fountain, the Piazza Navona. I talked a couple of weeks ago about the ancient history of that area, and we're moving on to talk about the fountains and the churches of the Renaissance and the Baroque. I'm also going to be talking about Etruscan tombs in a few weeks' time at Cerveteri as well. So there's a real mix, ancient stuff, recent Renaissance Baroque stuff, and areas both in the city of Rome and in the sort of surrounding environs as well. And in the next couple of weeks, I should be doing a sort of online live tour of the Roman Forum as well. So that's sort of to be announced. So watch this space. If you're on Instagram, I'm Understanding Rome on Instagram as well.
Fantastic.
End of plug.
Yeah, so her website is understandingrome.com, and you can find her. I found her actually for the first time on Twitter at Understanding Rome as well, where she posts all the information about her upcoming talks. So if you want to follow her on social media, you can find her again there. And hopefully when tours actually start running again, I'll be able to work with her. I've got a lot of projects coming up that you'd be perfect for, Agnes. So we'll have to talk about that. So
with great pleasure.
Thanks everybody for watching today and joining us. We've got lots of things coming up this weekend. Cucina Quarantena is returning this weekend. I'll be cooking live in the kitchen. So hopefully you'll join me on Saturday and Sunday for a little bit of Italian home cooking for the fall. So thanks again, Agnes. It's been great to have you with us today. Ciao.
Thank you very much. Ciao.